This is the Business Experience Show. And now, your host, Lisa Caprelli.
Welcome to the Business Experience Show. I'm your host, Lisa Caprelli. Today we have the great privilege of speaking with communications expert and founder of Accelerate, Kimberly Gerber. Welcome, Kimberly.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm glad to be here.
Yay. So tell us about your business background, Kimberly.
My business background, I started my career in, went to school for marketing and communications and started my career in advertising and promotions and headed out from New York to California to attend grad school, in my 20s. While I was doing that, I ran a home care agency and later owned a home care agency before I was recruited to Fleetwood Enterprises. And there I had a really awesome opportunity to run a multi-million dollar, in fact, a $20 and $40 million advertising and PR campaign.
Okay, how old were you at this time?
Between 24 and 29.
That's amazing, first of all.
Yeah,
I have to stop and say that.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun. And from there, I went to Starbucks Coffee, and I worked as a marketing director there for a number of years during a really fun time in that company, and just had a great experience. I was recruited from that position to a COO for an internet company, and it was kind of during the time of the .com, .bomb era. So during that time, I had a lot of folks reach out to me and ask, basically tell me, hey, you're not going to have a job very long, so would you help me with a project? And after I had about 5 clients, I realized I actually had my own consulting firm. And so I started Accelerate in 2002, and we've been super successful ever since.
That's awesome. So you had some early business success in your 20s. Tell me about that.
Sure. I think of a couple things. The first real business and entrepreneurial success that I had was working for the home care agency. As I mentioned, I was going to grad school, and so I had taken a job initially as a staffer. I was not very good at that job, but soon was promoted to the PR manager and eventually became the general manager for that company and was able to take them from being a $2 million company to a $6 million company in under a 2-year time frame. And during that period, there just came an opportunity for me to start my own firm, which I did with a partner. And it was just a really cool opportunity for me. I think I was 24 at the time. And I was able to grow. Within 6 months, we had $1 million business. And back in 1992, that was, even more money than it is today. It was really kind of a heady experience. And I got to learn a lot about business and a lot about being my own boss at a really early age. It wasn't my dream, at least initially, to be an entrepreneur. I really wanted to work in the corporate environment. And so when I had the opportunity to go to a Fortune 500 company, I jumped. And it was really great. But I have never lost appreciation for that early success in business.
Right. Well, I have to ask you, what do you attribute that success to? If you could give that some secret tips or characteristics that you had that you could give that to a 20-something-year-old.
Sure. Well, I don't think that what made me successful is necessarily a secret. I would attribute it to 2 things. One is having clarity about what needed to be done at the time. So when I was working in the home care agency, I knew my role was to provide an amazing resource to nurses, discharge planners, families, doctors, and to an aging population. And I never provided the care myself. Again, a job I would not have been good at. But I knew what needed to be done, right? So I knew about the client care that needed to happen and the training that needed to happen for the people that needed that care. So I was really focused on, really what would be a quality service. And I worked very hard to make sure that the company, that my company and the company that I worked for provided the best possible choice in that. So it was a laser-like focus on what would make for the best service. And then just a relentless pursuit of clients. I remember in that every day, I would make a list of everything I needed to do, and I just followed through. And I was creative about how I could break through some barriers. So I think that within me there is a certain creativity. And I remember I remember there was some hospitals and some discharge planners that just wouldn't return my calls. They wouldn't see me. They wouldn't meet me. And so I bought a bunch of planners peanuts, and I remember peeling all the labels off and taping my own label on that basically said, "You're a tough nut to crack." And I sent those out, and it worked. People just thought it was funny, and they were like, "Okay, well, here's a person with some personality who really actually wants to talk to me," because they went through a lot of trouble. But also
I'm
was
gonna borrow that.
there's when you're working in an environment where there's a limited amount of people in your in your world that you need to connect with, you just need to be creative about creative and relentless about how you're going to break those initial doors down and start funny, humorous, really meaningful conversations with people. And I was good at doing that.
That's great. So lead us into how that career developed into what you do today, becoming, and you are a communications expert.
Sure. Thank you. Communications, whether it's been from a marketing perspective or an interpersonal perspective, has always been my love. It's always been my body of work, the thing that it's my genius. Mm-hmm. And so I worked from a sales and a relationship development capacity in my very early 20s. And then I was able to do what I had in mind was going to be my career, which was to run Fortune 500 advertising and marketing campaigns. That was what I wanted to do. And I'm so glad I did it. It was super beneficial. And what I learned in that process was, constantly studying how to get the consumers at large, right? So this large body of people, how to get them to do something that you wanted them to do. And this, I think, was fundamental to the work that I do today, because as a marketing person, you're constantly studying, you're drilling into the nitty-gritty details of your consumer groups. And now you're looking not at one person, you're looking at a large body of people, and you're looking for trends about what moves their purchase decision. And so I did a lot of work I did a lot of research, and of course I didn't do it myself. I worked with outside firms, I worked with research firms to do it, but I really got excited about seeing the trends and the things that would move the needle forward, and then working with creative teams to bring that to life in commercials, in promotions, in sales copy. It was a lot of fun to bring that, and eventually I was able to bring that also into what would make better product design. Right. While I was at Fleetwood, I got to do a lot of first and fun things for that company. But one of the first things that Fleetwood did, and I feel like I was a huge contributor to it, was to create a home that was sold nationwide, which is something that had never happened before in that company, that was a promotional home, right? And it was, of course, the largest selling home. They ended up replicating the program many times over because it was such a great success. But what we were able to do is to really look at what do consumers really want, and how can we build that home and then market it across a large group of people for the betterment of the company.
Tell us, you've worked with many huge brands. Mm-hmm. Name some.
Oh, some of the companies we've worked for. One of my favorite clients is Verizon. We've had a great long-term relationship, almost 10 years working with Verizon. We work with Lexus. We work with Allergan. We work with Blizzard Entertainment. We work with Invencis. We work with Whirlpool, Dow, and the list goes on. Oh, UCLA, USC. I feel like, I don't want to forget anybody. There's a long list. We've been very privileged. I feel very privileged to work with the caliber of companies that we do. And not only that we get to work with these great companies, but we've had very long-term relationships with a lot of these companies. It's been just something I'm really proud of for my company.
That's great. Congratulations.
Thanks.
On touching so many people.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good time for a break. I'm Lisa Caprelli. We're talking with Kimberly Gerber on the Business Experience Show. We'll be right back.
How do you stand out from your competition? If you've been wanting more leads, more results through social media, search engine optimization, video SEO, a better web presence, the Business Experience Show and Lisa Caprelli can help you. How will your customers choose you? How do you get to the top of Google organically? Grow your business effectively. It's easy. Market your business online and offline promote your brand. Want to advertise or be a guest on our show? Contact us today at thebusinessexperienceshow.com. That's thebusinessexperienceshow.com.
We are back with the Business Experience Show. I'm your host, Lisa Caprelli, and we're talking with communications expert and founder of Accelerate, Kimberly Gerber. So, Kimberly, what are some areas of communication you have found yourself coaching in over the years with these big brands that you mentioned before?
That's a great question, Lisa. I think that communication is, I refer to communication as boiling the ocean, right? People often say, "Oh, I want to improve my communication skills." I ask, like, what specifically about communication, right? So it's a large body of work. What I find, some of the trends, things that I see with leaders in particular, are first and foremost, I think that a lot of leaders are communicating through their own lens of what is good communication, right? So they know how they want to be communicated to, and so sometimes they get caught up communicating as if they're communicating to themselves. And I think this is probably true for all of us sometimes. And it's a bit, we hear the golden rule, and we interpret it, we hear it interpreted, do unto others as you would have done unto you.
Right.
But a real interpretation of the golden rule is do unto others as they would have done unto themselves, right? And so I try to help people understand that whenever they're talking to somebody else, whatever communications they're creating should be for that person, not for themselves. And so I do a lot of work helping people understand different interaction styles, different communication styles, and so that when they get to know people, or as they're getting to know people, they can tune the dial on their own communications to clear out, static that tends to come up in everyday communication. And when you kind of turn your observing, when you turn on your powers of observation, you're able to see so much more about what's happening in the conversation dynamic. And it helps people get rid of a ton of conflict and stress. So that's a key area.
Can you give, I'm sure you have many exercises, but can you think of one exercise where you went into a company, worked with the team, and they were just really transformed? So I have a client I've worked with for quite a while. And when I first started working with this group, I actually wasn't working with the key client initially, but a lot of the feedback that came from their leaders and managers was that the leader was always ready to pounce, right? So picture, if you're in a meeting and you've got your boss is kind of always, just everything, every time you're talking, you feel like they're kind of staring at you and they're waiting for their turn to talk, and they're waiting for, the thing to, to find the thing that's wrong. And so I eventually brought this to the leader, and I said, here's some feedback from your team. And, first of all, tell me what, how you interpret that. What's that all about? And what I realized, just in meeting the individual, was they had a really high energy, and they were constantly in a body disposition that I'll call resolution, which is a very forward energy. It's always in action. It's always in motion. And so this person also happened to be super smart, really, assertive. And so you combine all of these personal style traits, and when people aren't aware of them, then they tend to build up these Popeye muscles, right, in these areas of talent. And so here was this individual with great intentions and, not wanting to actually do any of the things that she was doing from a communication perspective. But what she needed help was, one, seeing herself the way others saw her, which we all need that. And then what she needed was a few techniques to learn how to use her body better, quite frankly. Her body, her facial expressions. And so instead of always being in resolution, she had to learn how to bring herself back into stability and openness, which are calmer, more soothing, more open energies. And
she was able to do this. And in the course of just, a couple of months, she went from being someone who was rather intimidating to being someone who people started to really want to mentor under, and, became a phenomenal leader, someone who, people have a hard time today believing that she was someone who was so intimidating a while ago.
Wow.
And of course, as this has happened, her responsibilities have grown and all of that. So
That's
it's
a
a real
great
success
story.
story. Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Yeah.
Wait, who brought her in to work with you?
Well, so initially, one of her employees had attended the company's corporate leadership development program. So one of my programs, Communication Mastery, is often used as a segment in companies' overall leadership training and development programs. So one of her people had been nominated to that company-wide program and had attended my course. What we helped him do was recognize, without ever knowing his manager, just with enough traits that he shared with us, we helped him understand that she had what I would call an in-charge style, and we gave him some techniques on how he could fine-tune his communication
To work with her.
And so he did. He went back, and the day he returned back, he he knew a couple things to do and not to do with her, and he had turned on a dime. And so within 10 days of his returning from that course, she called me. She called one of my staff and asked for her whole management team to go through that course.
Wow.
So she wasn't going through the course, but she had her whole management team go through the course. And it was during the course of working with 17 other managers of hers that we realized that maybe we should do some work with her as well. And she agreed, and she went through the program as well and did some personal coaching with me.
That's great. So let's shed some light on that for a company who's watching this. Maybe it's a corporate company and they want to send their leaders to the Communication Mastery.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things you're going to bring into their company? Tools, workbooks, what do you do?
So the program it's a 3-day program. It's a live event program, and we do it on site in corporations, and then we also have public workshops where companies can send in their 1 or 2 employees, or sometimes a little bit more, but usually 1 or 2 employees to an off-site workshop. In fact, we have one coming up in January. But the what we do with that, it's a 4-phase program. We guide people through a 4-phase process that starts with self-discovery. And self-discovery isn't just about self-assessments. It's also about gaining a valid perspective from other people. So there's a very deep self-discovery process, and then we work with people on shifting perspectives. And a lot of people say, oh, shifting perspectives. Yeah, I heard that person. I can restate their point of view. But shifting perspectives is so much different. It's so much deeper. And it's really a nuanced area of communications that most people overlook or just aren't interested in. But if you look at uber good communicators like attorneys and hostage negotiators, these people are exceptional at shifting perspectives. And it's something that as you learn, you can absolutely develop amazing finesse in your communication. So we spend a lot of time there. And then we do technique training. And technique training is different for every individual because we all have different talents. And so I'm always working with people to build up on their talents while reducing the limitations that they naturally have. And we all have communication strengths, and we all have communication limiters. And then we put it into real world practice so that when folks leave the 3-day workshop, they are immediately able to transform their communications.
And this must help them in their personal life, their friendships and work relationships.
Yeah, it is. It's transformational, and so much so that people have gifted the program to their spouses, their sisters.
That's
awesome. It's one of those programs where people leave and they wish they'd had it 10 and 15 years ago, and we hear a lot of times that it's the richest professional and personal development experience that they've ever had.
That's amazing. I'm so happy to hear that. And I've heard you say self-assessment is not a valid assessment.
That's one of my favorite things to say. I absolutely, positively, 100% believe that a self-assessment is not a valid assessment. A self-assessment is simply what you think of yourself, and sometimes has absolutely no relevance to how people are perceiving you.
How do you see other people's styles, and how do you teach that?
It's a great question. So how do you see other people's styles, and how do you teach them? All right, I'm going to give you the simplest answer I can. You learn about style, first of all. You have to understand a style, a model for style. There's many out there today. I have worked with several. My favorite, because it's the richest, is it's the Myers-Briggs, the MBTI, which a lot of people are familiar with, but it is a subset of the Myers-Briggs called interaction styles. And for communication, that is a very it's a great aspect of the Myers-Briggs, and it's a little bit easier for people to understand than the whole entire 16 types. So whatever style platform you use, learn the platform and the language associated with it, and then begin to watch people for the traits that they have, because people will tell you who they are through their everyday behavior. Not how they show up on stage and not how they show up in a big meeting, but it's the everyday behavior. And that's the work I love to do with people. I do, presence coaching, I do speech coaching, but my favorite thing to do is to help people with everyday interactions. And if you look at people, you watch people, you watch how they hold their facial expressions, how they move, what their speech patterns sound like, you will begin to understand which of the 4 interaction styles they tend to fall into, and then you can just tune your dial to meet their needs. So it's a combination of understanding what the needs of the different styles are, and then watching people for their individual traits.
Kimberly, share with our audience the 3 fatal flaws female executives make that keep them from being promoted.
Well, there are 3 fatal flaws, and that in particular females make that do keep them from getting promoted. The first one is that they don't have a valid perspective of how they show up for others. And so they can run the gamut of whether they're too aggressive or too abrasive, or that they're too quiet or too shy. They run the whole gamut. Right. But what I find is that very often women in particular are trying hard to be a certain way, and that they lose a sense of how they're really showing up for other people. And as I mentioned before, a self-assessment is not a valid assessment. And so what people need to do, women in particular, is they really need to be good at getting candid feedback about how they're showing up in everyday communications, in meetings, in boardrooms, in public, in networking, and all of that. The second thing that's a flaw for females in particular is they don't build social capital in corporations the way that men do. So this is probably based on socialization. The way that women tend to have friends and make friends is different than men. And so in a corporate perspective, women need to be, I shouldn't say need to be anything, but they would serve themselves much better if they were more forward in what they're asking for and what kind of relationships they're forging and why they're forging them. So a little bit of a little page from the Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In is to look at how you build social capital, and so there's definitely ways for women to do it in a way that's in integrity with who they are, and yet still being a little bit more commanding or demanding about who they're developing relationships and why. So the third fatal flaw that a lot of women leaders make is that they think that their work stands and speaks for itself. So they have great work ethic, they're awesome managers, good leaders, and they think that people are going to, the people making big decisions are going to look at that and say, ooh, awesome leader, great, very humble, we like that. But it doesn't happen, and they get frustrated. And the reason it doesn't happen is because work doesn't tend to speak. I mean, sure, it produces results. Right. But if nobody is out there telling people that that's your work, or how you did it, or what creativity you brought to it, then all of that, it just stays under the radar. And so women in particular tend to be more humble or I shouldn't say they're humble. They're actually, they know they did this work. They want to be recognized for it, and they're waiting to be recognized for it. And so one of the things that I love to work with women on is being able to brag better. Right? So that they're able to showcase their work. They're able to take responsibility for the work that they do. And so that when it comes time to, hand out the raises and the promotions and all of that, they are looked at as people who have stood for their work and who have some expectation, some positive expectation, and who are deserving.
So this is why it's so important that we need to come to your Communication Mastery event, and your next one is January.
Yeah, it's January 25th through 27th, and it's going to be in Irvine, California. So we're super excited about that. We do this event 4 times a year, and it is just a wonderful, transforming event for folks.
And you could get more information about Kimberly Gerber at her website, KimberlyGerber.com. Kimberly, Kimberly, Gerber, Gerber.com. Well, it's been a pleasant experience speaking with you today, Kimberly. Thank you so much for being with us on the Business Experience Show and sharing your knowledge with so many people that can benefit. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Lisa Caprelli, and that's a wrap for the BusinessExperienceShow.com. And today we had the great privilege of interviewing Kimberly Gerber, founder of Accelerate.